The earliest sparks of civilization ignited within the lush lowlands of Mesopotamia, an area cradled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. This territory, whose title translates as "between the rivers," provided the vital ingredients for the rise of the world's first complex society. Mesopotamia presented a dual nature. While the surrounding desert posed an inhospitable barrier, the rivers nourished the land with their life-giving flow. Intense summer heat scorched the earth, yet each year flooding enriched the soil with layers of fertile silt. These opposing environmental forces forged the resilience and resourcefulness of those who settled here. Around the 7th millennium BCE, the first lasting communities appeared, associated with what we now call the Ubaid culture. Settlements such as Tel al-Ubaid produced the initial evidence of sun-dried brick buildings, the starting point for urban architecture. These early inhabitants lived before the advent of metal tools, formal writing, or monarchy, but their innovations would form the bedrock for all three. A pivotal moment in Mesopotamian development came with the control of water. Through canal construction, the inhabitants harnessed seasonal floods, converting chaotic deluges into dependable sources of irrigation. This revolutionized agriculture in a parched region, enabling food surpluses once thought impossible. This fusion of environment and ingenuity launched a bold social experiment. During the later stages of the Neolithic period, from modest origins rose a civilization that defined city living, invented written communication, and laid down technologies still relevant in modern times. The phase known as the Ubaid period, named for the archaeological zone of Tel al-Ubaid, marked the initial move toward a structured society in southern Mesopotamia. Artisans of the time produced unique ceramic ware adorned with black motifs painted against a pale green base, key cultural markers still identifiable today. Simple clay containers gradually evolved into refined works of art, hinting at emerging specialization among craftspeople who devoted entire lifetimes to their craft. The dwellings of this early era display a shift toward organized community life. At first, circular huts made of bundled reeds stood in the marshy terrain. But by 6000 BCE, these were replaced by rectangular mud brick homes grouped around open courtyards, architectural changes that reflected new social patterns, evolving from nuclear families to cooperative households. Plant remains from these early communities reveal advanced farming knowledge. They grew 6-row barley, emmer wheat, and flax, practiced crop rotation to preserve soil quality, and cultivated date palms for fruit, shade, and building material. Garden plots yielded vegetables like onions, beans, and garlic. This diverse agriculture, combined with fishing, animal husbandry, and foraging, created a resilient food web. Hierarchical structures began to emerge during this formative stage. Burial sites exhibit discrepancies in grave goods. Some interments contained only plain pottery, while others featured rare items like obsidian and lapis lazuli, acquired through trade over great distances, clear indicators of varying social ranks and roles. The sophistication of water systems also suggests coordinated group labor, likely overseen by centralized leadership, since such engineering required long-term planning and upkeep. Spiritual life revolved around collective worship spaces that grew in scale and complexity. At Tel al-Ubaid, excavators uncovered a tripartite sanctuary with a grand central room flanked by side chambers, a design that became standard in Mesopotamian temples for thousands of years. Among the ritual artifacts were feminine figurines, possibly connected to fertility beliefs. The growing size of these structures reflected increased community investment in religious institutions. Eridu, one of the oldest and most influential of these early towns, rose near a now-vanished lake in present-day southern Iraq. This site holds the earliest known Mesopotamian temple. Excavations revealed 17 consecutive temple structures built atop one another over more than 2 millennia. The first was a modest mud brick platform. Each renovation enlarged and embellished the space, ultimately forming a major religious complex dedicated to Enki, the deity of fresh waters and wisdom. This sacred center prefigured the monumental temple cities of future Mesopotamian kingdoms. The shift from wandering tribes to rooted village life marked a turning point in human history. Formerly mobile hunter-gatherers began to form lasting communities tied to a particular region. Land ownership emerged as people invested in homes and fields passed down across generations. Religious calendars aligned with farming seasons, reinforcing a shared sense of time and purpose. Carefully saved seeds weren't merely the next season's crop, they carried ancestral knowledge forward. Central to Sumerian progress was water regulation. Well before towering ziggurats dominated the skyline, early cultivators engineered canal networks. Using stone and wood tools, they linked rivers to far-off fields, turning erratic water supplies into consistent irrigation. This allowed new settlements to flourish beyond the river's edge. Despite their limited technology, these early engineers established gradients for water flow that spanned kilometers, crafted levees to protect crops, installed gates to control water release, and used sediment traps to keep canals clear. Maintaining this system required continual labor, dredging channels, reinforcing walls, removing obstructions, all of which depended on organized community effort. The sacred center of Eridu symbolizes this era's achievements. Founded in the 6th millennium BCE, it grew around a sanctuary devoted to Enki, a tribute to the water deity who enabled their survival. Archaeological layers depict its rise from a basic altar to a compound with multiple halls and courtyards. Eridu was not just a populated site, it became the first true city temple where spiritual and civic duties merged. This age witnessed a profound shift in humanity's interaction with nature. For countless years, people had roamed in search of game and wild plants. Now they remained in one place, raising crops through controlled labor. Barley and emmer grew under irrigated care, while herds of sheep and goats offered milk, meat, and fiber. These changes reshaped society. Dwellings included storage spaces, a sign of long-term planning. Clay counters shaped like various objects began to appear, possibly representing the earliest accounting tools used to track harvests and inventory. Communal cemeteries also emerged, underscoring a strengthened attachment to place and group identity. Throughout this pivotal epoch, humanity laid the groundwork for unmatched social complexity. Villages expanded as surplus food supported larger populations. Specialized trades developed as not everyone was required to farm. This foundation set Mesopotamia on a course toward urban civilization, a path that would shape history. As the 5th millennium BCE came to its conclusion, the early agricultural foundations established in Eridu and similar settlements blossomed into something extraordinary. The scattered communities of southern Mesopotamia began merging into a radically new societal form, true cities. Leading this groundbreaking transformation was a settlement that would eventually evolve into the planet's first true urban giant. By around 3200 BCE, this city had rapidly expanded to cover nearly 6 square kilometers, enclosed by monumental walls and populated by nearly 50,000 inhabitants, a level of human concentration previously unseen. This was far more than a large village. It was a groundbreaking structure of human social organization. The sun-dried brick fortifications did more than protect. They defined a border between the structured human domain and the untamed wild outside. Urban planning within the city was sophisticated. At its heart stood the Ina complex, a district dedicated to the deity Inanna. This religious precinct featured interconnected temples centered around courtyards and processional paths. A prominent feature was the White Temple, elevated on an artificial platform, a forerunner to later ziggurats, with commanding views of the cityscape. Residential zones radiated out from these sacred precincts, arranged along tight, winding lanes filled with daily hustle and bustle. Digs within the Ina sector have revealed a highly intricate set of religious buildings unlike anything seen before. The so-called Stone Cone Temple, named for the decorative pebbles embedded in its walls, employed a three-part layout with a central space flanked by side rooms. Nearby, the limestone temple stood out, built from imported stone, a rare and extravagant resource in this region, highlighting the significance of spiritual construction. The pillar hall, with its giant columns and lofty ceilings, was crafted to evoke a sense of awe. Its interiors featured decorative touches such as clay cone mosaics and copper accents, shimmering in the blazing Mesopotamian sun. Elsewhere in the city, another religious hub emerged, the Anu ziggurat, devoted to the sky god Anu. This tiered structure, crowned by the White Temple, rose like a man-made mountain. The blinding white walls of this sanctuary stood out against the deep blue sky, visible for miles. Inside, a single chamber housed an altar and a ritual table where priests conducted ceremonies meant to bridge the divine and earthly realms. A grand staircase ran along the ziggurat's side, functioning both as a literal and symbolic path between the mortal and celestial domains. Life within this urban environment deeply altered human relationships. Personal acquaintance could no longer be assumed. Neighbors were often strangers, necessitating new norms and structured roles. Archaeology indicates increasing disparity in household sizes, a clear marker of emerging social divisions. While some homes remained basic one-room dwellings, others expanded into large complexes featuring private courtyards, a clear sign of a rising elite. Excavations show compact homes tightly packed along narrow alleys, where waste piled up between infrequent cleanings. Extended families often inhabited larger residences built around central open areas that allowed light, air, and space for chores. Many homes had burial sites beneath the floors, preserving a bond between living and ancestral generations. Upper floors provided respite from daytime heat, while rooftops served as living spaces during cooler evenings. Repeated reconstruction over centuries along the same street grid shows lasting community bonds and well-established neighborhoods. The sustainability of these urban settlements depended on a new kind of mutual reliance and role-specific labor that was unknown in earlier village life. Farmers delivered produce to city markets. Skilled laborers crafted specialized items. Priests acted as spiritual liaisons, and workers maintained the public sphere. This diversification of work represented a decisive break from the self-reliant lifestyle of earlier rural communities. This transition triggered a surge of innovation that forever altered the trajectory of human progress. Chief among these developments was the creation of writing, the first external system of information storage. Originating from practical necessity rather than artistic intent, the earliest examples, dating to circa 3400 BCE, used pictorial marks to denote items like livestock or grain. Temple officials used these symbolic records to monitor goods entering and exiting storage facilities. Initially, each icon closely resembled its subject, a star-like shape for sheep, a pot for beer. These records allowed for a new level of economic precision. In a relatively short time, this system matured into genuine writing. Symbols evolved to represent not just objects, but abstract ideas. Scribes began rotating characters and inscribing them with a stylus to produce the familiar wedge-shaped impressions known as cuneiform, from the Latin cuneus wedge. The symbol set shrank from over 2,000 pictographs to around 600 simplified characters, making the system both easier to learn and more versatile. By 3000 BCE, writing could represent speech sounds, enabling scribes to record personal names, verbs, and grammatical structures, a monumental leap toward fully expressive written language. Over time, these once utilitarian marks evolved into a robust script capable of conveying complex ideas. The written word allowed human thought to transcend memory, facilitating intricate administration, detailed mathematics, and ultimately, literature. With writing, knowledge could accumulate across generations, no longer bound by the limitations of oral tradition. Equally groundbreaking was the innovation of the wheel. Toward the close of the 4th millennium BCE, local potters adapted their spinning platforms into true potter's wheels, enabling them to craft ceramics with unmatched speed and uniformity. Soon after, wheeled transport revolutionized mobility. Small models from this era depict four-wheeled carts drawn by oxen or onagers, vastly improving goods movement. Early wheels were solid wood discs, secured by leather and wooden pegs. These soon gave way to more refined, lighter constructions made from joined segments, strong yet less cumbersome. Around 2000 BCE, spoked wheels appeared, powering swift chariots and reshaping both warfare and communication. This period also marked major progress in metallurgy. While native copper had been used earlier, Sumerian metallurgists learned to extract metal from ore via heating, a process called smelting. This unlocked broader access to copper, leading to widespread use of metal for tools, weapons, and decorative items. Burial finds from the time show increasing metalworking sophistication. Artisans began producing tougher alloys like arsenical copper. The earliest metallurgical processes involved heating or bearing rocks in simple fires to extract small usable bits. Eventually, they built specialized furnaces capable of higher heat, using clay tubes tuyères to channel air and intensify flames. By the end of the Uruk era, these experts had perfected casting molten metal into ceramic molds, allowing uniform production. Archaeologists have uncovered entire workshop areas complete with molds, slag remains, and crucibles, evidence of early industrial-scale metal production that supported the growing urban population. These leaps in technology were made possible by a new kind of workforce: full-time artisans. Unlike their village predecessors who split time between farming and crafting, these city dwellers devoted their lives to perfecting a single skill. Potters, metalworkers, and stone carvers established specialized workshops, enabling levels of expertise unseen before. To manage this complex society, revolutionary bureaucratic systems emerged. Temples served not just religious roles, but also economic and administrative functions. The Ina precinct, for example, housed both sacred shrines and extensive storage areas, offices, and workshops, where officials tracked and controlled resources. Urban economies were run on a redistributive model. Agricultural goods were brought to temples as divine offerings, stored, and then distributed back out to support various segments of society: clergy, artisans, and workers alike. Clay tablets from this era contain detailed records of distributions, labor schedules, and food rations, showing how these administrative systems operated. Temples standardized allocations based on age, sex, and role. Thousands of small clay markers, cones, discs, and spheres were used to track commodities before being enclosed in clay envelopes. These evolved into numerical marks on tablets, birthing a new field of mathematical accounting. Officials devised systems to record transactions, calculate interest, and forecast harvests, forming the roots of economic science. This record-keeping produced an entirely new elite, the scribes. Young people, mostly male, though some female, underwent long and rigorous education to master cuneiform. Learning to inscribe these tablets precisely was difficult, and only a few succeeded, earning them privileged posts in both temple and palace bureaucracies. Scribes would remain vital to Mesopotamian culture for millennia. With time, clear social divisions solidified. Evidence from graves, homes, and written records points to increasing class structure. Administrative documents list a wide variety of job titles: priests, foremen, traders, specialists, and laborers, illustrating a society no longer socially equal. Crucially, this period offers the first clues of systemic inequality. Some texts describe individuals as servants or slaves, though the exact legal meaning remains uncertain. Temples and later royal institutions appear to have directed forced labor for major public works and farming. This structured exploitation was the grim underside of Sumer's spectacular accomplishments. As the 4th millennium ended, The Sumerian experiment in urban life had succeeded beyond imagination. The advancements born in the southern Mesopotamian plains would echo across the ancient world, laying the groundwork for the civilizations yet to come. As the third millennium BC unfolded, Mesopotamia transitioned into a new developmental era defined by the emergence of rival city-states. The preceding phase of urban proliferation gave way to increased political division. The rich floodplain between the Tigris and Euphrates now supported numerous autonomous domains, each centered on a principal city and its farming hinterland. Notable among these were Eridu, Kish, Lachish, Umma, and Nippur, each functioning as a sovereign entity with distinct rulers, patron gods, and expansionist goals. These cities were fortified with impressive defensive structures. Broad, sturdy walls guarded residents from outside threats. At their cores stood monumental complexes, sanctuaries, administrative hubs, and royal palaces. Residential areas extended outward in dense formations, interconnected by canals that not only supplied water for daily needs, but also served as trade routes. The architectural advancements of the time reflected long-standing traditions and refined engineering skills. Excavations at Ur, led by Leonard Woolley in the early 20th century, showcased a typical early dynastic city. Its dual-wall system encircled almost 60 hectares, with the outer perimeter stretching over 4 kilometers. Although reconstructed in later eras, the Grand Ziggurat's foundations dated to this period. The residential zones contained compact homes along labyrinthine alleys too narrow for carts. At the city's center lay the renowned royal necropolis, where archaeologists uncovered stunning displays of elite affluence and ceremonial customs, including mass graves with human sacrifices honoring the deceased elite. Kish, in northern Babylonia, held symbolic significance as the city said to have received kingship from the divine after the legendary deluge. Archaeological findings there uncovered extensive civic architecture, such as a palace known for its plano-convex bricks. According to the Sumerian king list, Kish hosted the first ruling dynasty after the flood, underlining its mythological and ideological role. Lachish, despite its smaller size, grew into a formidable power through its control of a fertile region supported by key urban centers like Gersu and Nina. Inscriptions from Lachish form a vital record of early dynastic administration, regional skirmishes, and political doctrine. These texts chronicle repeated clashes with nearby Umma over disputed lands, marking one of the era's best documented rivalries. During this transformative time, leadership models evolved. Early city governance was often led by temple priests who served as intermediaries between gods and people. But now, secular warlords, lugals, or big men, emerged as dominant figures, initially rising to power during local conflicts. Over time, these military leaders established dynastic succession and institutionalized their rule. These monarchs legitimized authority through divine selection. Inscriptions proclaimed their God-given right to reign, and elaborate enthronement ceremonies underscored this celestial endorsement. Kings ordered the construction of magnificent buildings, temples, and palaces that served as physical symbols of their divinely sanctioned rule. These projects used imported resources, expert labor, and groundbreaking design techniques meant to awe both their subjects and foreign envoys. Nevertheless, royal power wasn't absolute. Aristocratic households maintained sway through advisory councils capable of limiting royal decisions. Additionally, local sanctuaries retained independence in religious matters. The friction between centralized monarchy and enduring local traditions made for a constantly shifting political scene. Unsurprisingly, these sovereign city-states frequently clashed. Artifacts from the period provide rare visual records of such confrontations. The famed Standard of Ur, a wooden artifact inlaid with shell and lapis lazuli, presents vivid military scenes. Organized troops, chariot assaults, and prisoners paraded before a towering leader, likely the king. Measuring roughly 20 by 45 centimeters, This piece depicts contrasting sides, warfare and celebration. One panel illustrates battle wagons crushing foes and spearmen subduing captives. The other shows a feast attended by musicians and servers offering livestock and fish. Another chilling representation of war is the stele of the vultures, erected by Eonatum of Lagash around 2450 BC to commemorate his victory over Umma. One face portrays him at the head of a phalanx, trampling enemies beneath heavy shields. The reverse side shows vultures carrying off severed heads, an image that lends the monument its name. The stele also documents a bitter territorial dispute over a fertile zone known as Gu Eden and includes inscriptions detailing divine involvement, with Lagash's patron god Ningirsu appearing in a dream to promise triumph. Eonatum's victory led to heavy reparations and the building of memorial mounds over enemy corpses, an early mix of history, religion, and propaganda. Such conflicts drove advancements in warfare. Archaeological finds show evolving weaponry, with copperless spearheads replacing earlier stone versions. Helmets and body armor became standard for elite warriors, while composite bows, made from wood, horn, and sinew, offered greater power and accuracy. These developments marked the rise of specialized soldiers, often rewarded with land or supplies in return for service. Unearthed gear includes decorated mace heads, mass-produced arrowheads, and intricately crafted helmets, signs of increasing military professionalism. Most wars focused on farmland and irrigation access. The stele of the vultures specifically highlights border tensions over canal routes, vital lifelines in a region where agriculture equaled power. Victory secured more than territory. It enhanced a king's prestige and brought in prisoners who labored on construction projects and fields. Subjugated cities also paid tribute, enriching the conquering state's coffers with luxury items and resources, fueling further expansion and maintaining the cycle of conflict. Yet, despite or because of this competitive atmosphere, the early dynastic era produced immense cultural innovation. Excavated neighborhoods offer glimpses into everyday life. Homes range from single-room structures to expansive, multi-room complexes with interior courtyards. Most dwellings were made from mud brick with reed-covered roofs. Households cooked over central fires and slept on mats. Diets centered on barley, augmented by vegetables, legumes, fish, and occasional meat. Barley beer served as both daily refreshment and a ritual staple. Ceramic containers of various sizes supported cooking, storage, and consumption needs. Botanical and faunal remains reveal that barley was often made into bread or porridge. Fruits like pomegranates and dates sweetened meals, while vegetables like leeks and onions added flavor. Meat came from sheep, goats, pigs, and fish, though usually reserved for the wealthy or special occasions. Dairy, especially cheese and butter, was an important protein source. Beers varied in strength, with everyday versions and stronger brews reserved for festivals. Leisure activities added balance to hard labor. The royal game of Uruk, found in elite tombs, demonstrates the cultural importance of board games. This two-player race game used tetrahedral dice and ornate boards inlaid with shells, lapis lazuli, and red stones. More than a pastime, such games encourage strategic thinking and social interaction. The rules, reconstructed from later Babylonian texts, show a complex mix of luck and tactics. Similar games have been found across the Near East, indicating their popularity across cultures and classes. Women held multifaceted roles in this society. Although patriarchy prevailed, legal records show that women could own assets, run businesses, and serve religious functions. Some women owned textile workshops, suggesting economic agency. Royal and noble women often held considerable sway through kinship networks. Clay tablets detail legal rights, such as property ownership, inheritance, and divorce arrangements. Marriage contracts outlined obligations and terms. Breweries were commonly managed by women, offering a source of income. Administrative records even mention female scribes, implying access to advanced education. Priestesses served prominent roles in temples, particularly those devoted to goddesses. While gender inequality existed, Mesopotamian women of this era enjoyed more autonomy than in many later societies. Mathematics flourished, driven by practical needs in trade and administration. The base 60 sexagesimal system enabled accurate measurements of space, volume, and weight. Tablets from this period display sophisticated calculations, roots, algebra, and problem-solving techniques. This numerical system, refined from earlier Uruk foundations, endured beyond Mesopotamia and still informs our timekeeping and geometry. 60 seconds, 60 minutes, and 360 degrees in a circle. Cuneiform writing also reached a new stage, evolving into a complex system of wedge-shaped symbols. Initially used for economic record-keeping, it expanded to include hymns, epics, and royal decrees. Mastery of this script required long-term schooling, forming a professional scribal class that preserved and transmitted culture. Excavated tablet houses, edubas reveal rigorous training methods. Students practice shaping clay, handling styluses, and copying texts, from simple signs to bilingual dictionaries. Advanced instruction included legal, mathematical, and literary subjects. Discipline was strict, with punishments for errors mentioned in school texts. This standardized curriculum not only educated bureaucrats, but also bonded the literate elite who staffed the state's institutions. These intellectual and artistic accomplishments, born amid political rivalry and warfare, highlight the extraordinary resilience and ingenuity of early dynastic Mesopotamian civilization. The rivalry among autonomous urban centers encouraged creativity, as each aimed to surpass the others through grand structures, artistic refinement, and scholarly breakthroughs. The people of ancient Mesopotamia envisioned their reality as entirely infused with divine influence. Natural events, societal systems, and human behavior were all considered components of a cosmic framework established by celestial beings. This perspective took shape in a rich array of gods and goddesses, each governing distinct aspects of life. At the summit of this celestial structure stood four primary deities. An ruler of the heavens symbolized ultimate power, but remained somewhat distant from mortal affairs. Enlil, associated with winds and storms, served as the executor of divine plans, issuing decisions that shaped fate. Enki, lord of underground waters, was a figure of cleverness and wisdom, frequently stepping in to aid humans during peril. Inanna, sovereign of the skies, ruled over affection, procreation, and war, embodying the dual energies of life and chaos. Below these top-tier beings existed countless minor gods, each responsible for specific areas. Nana governed the moon, Utu the sun, Ninhursag the land, Ninurta oversaw farming, and Jibal fire, among many others. Every feature of existence had its heavenly overseer, rendering the universe alive with divine intent. The Sumerians believed that the gods had crafted a foundational set of cosmic decrees called pronounced May. These sacred directives governed both the natural world and human civilization, dictating how everything operated. When humans upheld the Me, balance between society and the universe was preserved. The creation tale known as Enuma Elish, though kept alive through later Akkadian versions, contains elements rooted in Sumerian thought. It begins with primeval waters preceding the division of sky and earth. From these waters, generations of deities arose, with younger gods ultimately vanquishing chaotic elder forces. The hero Marduk, who replaced Enlil in some retellings, formed the material world from the remains of the defeated Tiamat, bringing order through divine battle. This myth presented a cosmos shaped by celestial conflict and sustained by religious devotion. In this divine order, human origins were explained through stories. One version claimed that humans were molded from soil mixed with a fallen deity's blood, making them part divine and part mortal. Another version stated humans were created to spare the gods from toil. Temples would be maintained, sacrifices offered, and ceremonies carried out by people preserving divine order. The Atrahasis legend elaborates on this concept. Faced with rebellious lesser gods refusing to dig canals and manage the divine infrastructure, Enki and the mother goddess Ninta fashioned humans from earth and a sacrificed deity's blood. These beings would take over the labor on behalf of the gods. As the population grew and noise increased, the gods sent plagues and disasters to reduce humanity's numbers, thereby introducing mortality as a control mechanism. These sacred narratives define the central human duty, to serve divine beings through rituals and labor. This wasn't seen as oppression, but as a vital partnership, where fulfilling sacred roles earned divine blessings, such as fertile lands, political peace, and defense against calamities. The temple was the heart of spiritual life in Mesopotamia. Each prominent city featured vast holy enclosures dedicated to its patron deity. These sanctuaries evolved from humble altars to sprawling architectural marvels, culminating in towering platforms that eventually became ziggurats. These religious centers were viewed as the literal residences of gods who lived among their devoted caretakers. Rituals involved cleansing and adorning divine statues, providing meals, and performing elaborate purifications. A class of trained clergy kept the spiritual rhythm unbroken, ensuring the god's presence remained within the city. Each day started before sunrise, with ceremonial opening of temple gates. Morning offerings, bread, meat, ale, and incense were made to the god's statue, which was regarded as the deity's tangible form. Noon brought a second offering round, while the afternoon was devoted to managing the temple's assets. Evening rites concluded the day with more offerings, songs, and invocations before sealing the sanctuary. This never-ending cycle preserved the balance of the cosmos and simultaneously redistributed surplus crops through the temple's economic network. The layout of temples mirrored the divine order. Inner chambers housed sacred effigies and were only accessed by elite clergy, while outer areas welcomed the public during festivals. Temples built on raised platforms bridged the earthly and celestial domains, enhancing spiritual communication. In addition to state-sponsored worship, individual religious practice flourished at home. Archaeologists have uncovered miniature shrines within houses, complete with figures of guardian spirits or ancestral idols. These family-based rituals sought protection and favor, especially during hardship. Each household had its own deity, a spiritual liaison with greater gods. Personal altars were used for daily devotion. Key life events like birth, weddings, and death involved specific rituals to secure divine guardianship. These domestic traditions provided emotional and spiritual stability in a world prone to disease, floods, and warfare. To interpret divine messages, the Mesopotamians relied heavily on divination. Experts read signs and natural occurrences, the way oil floated on water, the shapes made by smoke, or the markings on sacrificial animal organs. These practices offered insight into divine intent and helped guide decisions. Among these, the study of sheep livers, called hepatoscopy, was the most advanced. Priests believed that gods wrote their intentions on animal organs. They analyzed features like bulges, color, and bile ducts according to established manuals. Other techniques included astrology, oil scrying, smoke reading, and dream analysis. These spiritual sciences enabled people to navigate uncertain futures with guidance from above. Throughout the year, sacred festivals renewed spiritual energy. The Akitu New Year celebration was especially elaborate, combining ritual duels, divine unions, and storytelling of creation legends. Such gatherings rejuvenated the cosmic framework and re-established harmony between people and gods. The Akitu, held during the spring equinox, was the most significant celebration. Spanning 12 days, it featured purification of temples, the symbolic humiliation and restoration of the king, chanting of the Enuma Elish, and a ceremonial union between a priestess embodying Inanna and the king. Temporary social reversals and playful traditions were part of the experience. The final days saw statues of gods paraded through the city amid communal feasting. This elaborate sequence affirmed divine rule, solidified royal power, and strengthened civic unity. The spiritual philosophy of the Sumerians was profoundly articulated in their writings. Skilled scribes created literary works exploring the bond between humanity and the divine. These texts, etched into clay tablets, represent the earliest human literature. One extraordinary figure in this tradition was Enheduanna, daughter of Sargon of Akkad and chief priestess of the moon god Nanna. Writing around 2300 BCE, she composed lyrical praises to Inanna. Her works bear her name, the first known author in history. In her most renowned piece, The Exaltation of Inanna Ninmi Sarah, she recounts personal turmoil during political conflict and appeals to the goddess for salvation. The composition blends autobiography, spiritual longing, and political insight with literary grace. Her temple hymns offer poetic descriptions of 42 sacred sites, forming a sacred geography of divine presence. Enheduanna's writing showcases remarkable technique, imagery, symmetry, and rhythmic repetition. Her passionate, engaged voice sets the foundation for future literary traditions. The most celebrated epic from this era, the Epic of Gilgamesh, explored deep existential themes, life, death, and the quest for meaning. Although compiled during later times, its roots lie in early tales about a historical king of Uruk. The story follows Gilgamesh, a part divine ruler who oppressed his people until the gods created Enkidu, a wild man, to challenge him. After a fierce encounter, they became close companions, embarking on heroic quests. When Enkidu died, Gilgamesh was overwhelmed by grief and the reality of death. Seeking eternal life, he journeyed to find Utnapishtim, the flood survivor granted immortality by the gods. Though Gilgamesh obtained a rejuvenating plant, he lost it and ultimately accepted his mortality. He found pride instead in Uruk's mighty walls, discovering that cultural legacy offers lasting meaning. Other religious writings included sacred songs glorifying divine traits and temple sites, laments for ruined cities, and stories of gods that explain natural events and social order. A notable example is Inanna's descent into the netherworld. This narrative portrays her voyage to the realm of her sister, Ereshkigal, ruler of the dead. At each of 7 gates, Inanna surrendered one divine attribute, arriving powerless. She was then struck down and hung lifeless. Her loyal servant Ninshubur secured heavenly aid for her resurrection, but only under the condition that she send a replacement. She chose her indifferent husband Dumuzi. This myth tackles themes of power, sacrifice, cosmic division, and renewal, using vivid symbolism and emotional depth. These texts were not merely artistic, they served practical religious functions. Reciting them at festivals renewed sacred events, laments sought to regain divine favor, and hymns invoked divine presence during rituals. Literature was an essential thread in the intricate web connecting human beings and the gods. The written legacy of Mesopotamia preserved its religious, historical, and cultural ideals for future generations. These surviving works provide extraordinary access to the ancient worldview and offer modern readers a window into the spiritual and intellectual landscape of the earliest known civilization. The rebirth of Mesopotamian civilization emerged in response to incursions from highland tribes, with the prevailing ideology casting these events in divine terms. Native kings were viewed as chosen agents restoring harmony between heaven and earth. This theological vision defined the political narrative of the Neo-Sumerian revival. The beginning of Mesopotamia's liberation from Gutian rule was marked by Utu-Hegel of Uruk, who achieved a notable military victory over these foreign invaders. However, his success was brief. Control transitioned to his former subordinate in Ur, a driven commander named Ur-Nammu, who founded a dynasty that ushered in a sweeping cultural and political revival. Ur-Nammu's military operations gradually reassembled the fragmented empire, city by city, district by district. His campaign reestablished governmental dominance across both Sumer and Akkad. Unlike previous empires that expanded through conquest, Ur-Nammu framed his leadership as a return to native Mesopotamian values, reinforcing his authority through appeals to cultural continuity. Royal inscriptions praise Ur-Nammu's divine mandate to restore peace and order following Gutian disruption. One inscription boasts of him liberating Sumer and Akkad from foreign dominance. Another celebrates his revival of international commerce. I reopened blocked roads and eliminated tolls. Excavations support these claims, revealing large-scale construction projects, irrigation restoration, and revived public works long neglected during the Gutian period. This renewal encompassed both functional infrastructure and emblematic architecture that legitimized the new royal regime. The Grand Ziggurat of Ur, the most iconic structure of the era, stood as the architectural emblem of this rebirth. Towering over 30 meters high, it was constructed with millions of sun-dried bricks and encased in baked bricks sealed with bitumen. It blended engineering innovation with sacred design, asserting the revived might of Mesopotamian civilization. The temple's style influenced holy sites across the region for centuries. The core of the ziggurat included around 720,000 fired bricks, each about 15 kilograms, supported by a vast internal mass of mud bricks. Drainage systems were carefully engineered to channel water away. 3 monumental stairways met at the first tier, leading to a central staircase that ascended to the temple at the summit. This powerful structure embodied the dynasty's restored political strength, economic means, and religious authority. Among Ur-Nammu's most lasting contributions was his legal code, which preceded Hammurabi's by 3 centuries. It standardized law across his territories, covering topics from family relations to business dealings. Penalties varied by the seriousness of the offense and were systematically defined. This was a pivotal moment in legal evolution, balancing royal control with consistent legal frameworks. The code opened with a preface citing the king's divine commission as judge. Its laws followed a conditional style. If a man does X, then Y shall happen. Covered offenses ranged from murder and perjury to agriculture and enslavement. Notably, Ur-Nammu's laws often imposed fines instead of death or dismemberment, unlike later Babylonian statutes, emphasizing justice through compensation. This preference for restitution reveals a nuanced legal philosophy aimed at societal balance. By enforcing a consistent rule of law across his territories, Ur-Nammu bolstered both the economy and centralized power while shielding individuals from arbitrary rule. Ur-Nammu's son, Shulgi, ascended the throne and ruled for an extraordinary 48 years, becoming synonymous with administrative brilliance and cultural achievement. Combining military strength with bureaucratic innovation, he constructed a highly advanced governmental system. The empire was subdivided into districts overseen by officials directly accountable to the palace. Records were standardized to guarantee uniform taxation and distribution of goods. A network of royal couriers operated along carefully maintained highways, linking major hubs. A complex redistributive economy moved grain from fertile zones to administrative centers and onward to regions requiring support. Documents from Oma's archives display the precision of this system, recording grain quotas, labor logistics, livestock counts, and taxes with meticulous detail. Land was classified by productivity, projected yields were calculated with formulas, and taxes assigned accordingly. Workforces were organized by specific tasks and measurable outputs. Couriers followed set routes on fixed timetables. These records reveal a government functioning with numerical exactitude over a diverse economic landscape. This quantitative approach enabled efficient allocation of resources. The Bala system exemplified this. It required each region to supply the state for a designated time annually, contributing food, goods, and labor by quota. Governors tracked these duties, and royal auditors verified the records to prevent fraud. This equitable sharing of economic burdens ensured steady support for the state, regardless of agricultural cycles. Its complexity and efficiency surpassed all earlier administrations. Alongside these structural feats, Shoji fostered a renaissance in writing and scholarship. Claiming fluency in both Sumerian and Akkadian, the king composed hymns about his reign. Court patronage ensured the preservation of ancient texts and creation of new ones. During his rule, the Sumerian literary canon was formalized, safeguarding works that might have otherwise vanished. Shoji was depicted as a model monarch, warrior, intellectual, athlete, and spiritual channel. Court hymns attributed to him, likely written by palace scribes, describe remarkable talents. I am Nesaba's scribe, fluent in Sumerian, solver of mathematical riddles. One hymn claims he ran 160 kilometers between Nippur and Uruk in a single day to officiate at both temples. These texts reinforced royal ideology and values, literacy, athleticism, piety, and divine favor. Education was central to Shogi's vision. The tablet house, or Eduba system, trained scribes through rigorous courses. Students began with basic science and progressed to legal, mathematical, and literary instruction. This produced the civil servants necessary for the complex bureaucracy while transmitting cultural knowledge. Scribal practice is visible in training tablets containing writing drills, vocabulary lists, math problems, and copied literature. Archaeological remains of schoolhouses show benches for students and raised platforms for teachers. Texts about school life mention strict discipline, including physical punishment for mistakes. The curriculum combined practical instruction with ideological training, ensuring graduates had both the skills and values needed for service. The security and wealth of the Neo-Sumerian period allowed scientific and scholarly advancements in many domains. Medical writings from this time show detailed knowledge of anatomy, disease, and healing. Healers distinguished between physical and spiritual causes, prescribing remedies tailored to each. Medicines were blends of herbs, minerals, and animal parts tailored to symptoms. Medical tablets categorized diseases by body part and presentation. Treatments included surgical techniques, ritual healing, and plant-based remedies with detailed preparation steps. The foundation for later Babylonian and even Greek medicine was laid here. The earliest diagnostic manuals, preserved in later versions, began in this period, an early form of evidence-based medical practice. Beer brewing also reached high sophistication. Records and ruins confirm numerous beer types with varying flavors, strengths, and ingredients. More than a beverage, beer served as food, sacred gift, and trade good. The brewing process had already been standardized, centuries before the science behind fermentation was understood. Over 20 kinds of beer were produced in palace and temple breweries, using different barley-water ratios and flavorings. Trained workers handled brewing in specialized facilities with dedicated tools. Beer was used to pay workers, offering hydration and calories in portable form. Certain rituals required specific beer types for different gods. Brewing consumed up to a third of regional barley output, showing its economic importance. Astronomy also progressed during this era. Observers documented lunar phases, planetary shifts, and seasonal markers with great accuracy. These patterns enabled development of more accurate calendars and agricultural planning. Celestial movements were also interpreted as divine messages. The lunar calendar evolved to include periodic intercalation, adding a 13th month 7 times in a 19-year cycle to stay aligned with the solar year. Astronomical diaries noted eclipses and planetary motions, building long-term datasets. Star maps grouped constellations, many of which later appeared in Greek astronomy. This legacy formed the basis of Babylonian and Hellenistic stargazing and shaped all subsequent Western astronomy. Thousands of clay tablets in palace and temple libraries documented this vast knowledge base, covering everything from sheep breeding to astrology. The Japar tablets detailed standard procedures for crafts and administration. Libraries at places like Nippur sorted these tablets by topic, stored in labeled containers. Indexing systems helped scribes access information efficiently. Court experts compiled reference works on language, math, and divination. These early archives preserved accumulated knowledge across generations. Though clay is fragile, the state's dedication to record-keeping shows their belief in knowledge as both a tool and a legacy. Even basic economic systems displayed conceptual advancement. Standardized weights and measures supported trade and showed mathematical insight. Silver became the standard medium of exchange, allowing complex multi-item deals. Loan contracts, joint ventures, and commercial agreements reveal legal and financial ingenuity that would shape future Near Eastern trade. Markets operated through shared currency systems and detailed contracts. Merchants traveled great distances, funded by investors in partnerships with profit-sharing clauses. Loans bore interest, and future-based contracts mitigated farming risk. Specialized trade courts handled disputes using merchant customs. This commercial complexity tied the empire together and funded its cultural golden age. A coordinated administrative structure, though adept at extracting and managing resources, imposed significant obligations on those working the land. The imposition of levies and demands for labor placed countryside communities at increased risk from shifts in environmental stability. Clues from excavations indicate a rise in soil salinity on farmlands, brought about by prolonged and intensive irrigation systems. This led to a steady decrease in crop productivity, even though farming methods remained highly developed. Studies of sediment samples from southern Mesopotamian regions point to a gradual salt buildup during the waning centuries of the 3rd millennium BCE. The irrigation technologies that enabled farming in such a dry landscape inadvertently elevated groundwater levels, bringing mineral content to the surface, where it was intensified through evaporation. As salt concentrations surpassed acceptable levels for grains like barley and wheat, harvests shrank. Agriculturalists responded by selecting barley strains more tolerant of saline soil and by abandoning the worst-hit plots. However, these adaptations served only as short-lived remedies for a worsening issue. The environmental difficulties facing the last stages of Sumerian society anticipated similar crises experienced by later high-intensity farming cultures. These internal vulnerabilities emerged at the same time as fresh outside threats. The Elamites, residing in the eastern mountainous region and long-standing adversaries of Mesopotamian states, escalated their military efforts against border territories. In tandem, nomadic Amorite herders from the west modern-day Syria began moving into cultivated lands, first seasonally as laborers, then increasingly as permanent residents. The combination of external assaults and migratory pressures strained Sumer's defense capacity beyond manageable levels. Administrative records from the final years of King Ibbi-Sin, last monarch of the Earth-3 regime, show mounting challenges in holding territory together. Local governors reported their inability to defend against Amorite raiders, citing a lack of reinforcements. Communications between the capital and remote districts grew unreliable as security broke down. Letters from the time speak of grain transports being obstructed by hostile forces, leading to shortages in major urban centers. These functional disruptions severely compromised the centrally planned economy that had powered the prosperity of the Neo-Sumerian period. The conclusive catastrophe occurred around 2004 BCE, when Elamite armies overtook the capital. Cuneiform documents recount the event with dramatic imagery: holy sites defiled, defensive walls torn down, inhabitants seized and enslaved. A mourning hymn known as the Lament for Ur portrays the city's protective goddess fleeing her sanctuary like a bird deserting its nest, powerfully illustrating the psychological trauma of collapse for a society that viewed civic order as a mirror of cosmic balance. The Lamentation poem delivers a poignant account of Ur's devastation. The city lies in ruins, the citizens wail in the streets once filled with celebration, and corpses cover roads once alive with festivity. The text mourns not just material destruction, but also reads it as a divine rejection. Nana, the moon deity, is said to have deserted his people, who are now described as if they had never existed. This view reflects the Mesopotamian worldview in which political breakdown signified a rupture in cosmic order, one that demanded ritual grieving to regain divine favor. The fall of Ur signified the closure of Sumerian dominance in regional governance. While numerous cities remained inhabited and sometimes populous, they no longer functioned as sovereign centers of rule. Power migrated northward, where Amorite-led dynasties established new hubs of authority at places like Isin and eventually Babylon. These new regimes embraced many features of Mesopotamian tradition, while introducing novel elements tied to their own heritage. One of the clearest signs of this transition appeared in speech patterns. While Sumerian had remained in use for official and religious purposes throughout both imperial and later periods, Akkadian came to dominate informal and daily communication. By around 1800 BCE, Sumerian remained mostly in scholarly and sacred contexts, similar in function to Latin in Europe's medieval period. This evolution in language use reflected broader cultural transformation. As Amorite communities blended into Mesopotamian life, they contributed fresh ideas and customs. Linguistic research, drawing on personal names, letters, and legal texts, confirms that this change accelerated in the period following Ur's downfall. Even as bureaucratic language retained Sumerian formulas, common speech increasingly leaned toward Akkadian and Amorite varieties. The age was marked by bilingual fluency. Inscriptions reveal that leaders navigated multiple linguistic environments. Education systems shifted accordingly, training scribes in Sumerian as a classical standard while also equipping them with practical proficiency in vernacular Akkadian. This dual approach ensured cultural continuity while enabling functional communication. Eventually, political leadership was firmly assumed by Amorite rulers. They validated their reign by aligning themselves with traditional Mesopotamian concepts of kingship, even as they preserved elements of tribal heritage. The most prominent among them, Hammurabi of Babylon, would go on to consolidate much of the former Sumerian realm under northern control. His renowned legal code, though composed in Akkadian, drew deeply on Sumerian precedents. The Amorite model of rule combined established royal symbolism with the preservation of kinship networks. Monarchs depicted themselves in conventional royal art, while affirming familial lineage in genealogical records. They supported existing temple worship while incorporating Western Semitic gods into the divine roster. This blending of traditions lent them legitimacy in the eyes of both urban dwellers steeped in Mesopotamian customs and nomadic groups retaining Amorite identity. Through this strategy, the Amorite dynasty succeeded in restoring order after a period of upheaval. Despite the political reorganization, cultural traditions displayed striking persistence. Temples carried on with ancient rituals, and scribal academies continued transmitting Sumerian literary works alongside newer Akkadian compositions. Knowledge in fields like mathematics, astronomy, and medicine, developed in earlier times, remained relevant and widely applied. This deep-seated cultural resilience ensured that the innovations of Sumer endured beyond its political end, shaping later Near Eastern civilizations in lasting ways. Excavations at places such as Nippur show material continuity. Temple complexes retain their architectural styles and ritual functions. Scribes still produced texts in time-honored layouts, even as newer content emerged. Legal and governmental documents reveal that Sumerian institutional norms were adapted to fit new power structures. The infusion of Amorite features into this entrenched system created a hybrid model that preserved foundational Sumerian advances while opening space for further evolution. In this way, the world's earliest city-based civilization survived, not as a frozen relic, but as a vibrant legacy, continually reshaping itself to meet new realities. The breakthroughs pioneered by the ancient Sumerians, particularly their early form of writing, transformed human society in ways that still resonate. Though first invented for accounting, their script grew into something far more impactful. Progressed into an adaptable medium for documenting everything from star charts to lyrical compositions. This milestone in the storage of knowledge extended across the ancient Near East, inspiring variations, such as character-based systems that later evolved into most of today's writing formats. Cuneiform's distinctive method influenced countless later scripts. Akkadian and Hittite peoples customized the format for their Semitic and Indo-European tongues accordingly. Elamite, Hurrian, and Urartian groups tailored cuneiform to accommodate their speech structures. The early Proto-Sinaitic alphabet, emerging in the turquoise mines of the Sinai around 1800 BCE, likely drew symbolic elements from Egyptian hieroglyphs, but shows abstract conceptual ties to Mesopotamian inscriptions, signaling a vital phase in the transition to alphabetical formats. This system would eventually evolve into Phoenician, which gave rise to Greek, Latin, Hebrew, Arabic, and nearly every modern Western and Middle Eastern writing form. This developmental arc illustrates how Sumer's contributions laid the groundwork for later communication tools that would reshape human expressive ability on a global scale. The city-based civilization, first seen in southern Mesopotamia, formed blueprints for human organization that expanded across the world. Populations centralized in designed urban environments with defined economic roles became the dominant way humans lived. Work specialization, formal trades, and bureaucratic systems, initially developed in Sumerian towns, provided structural templates that later societies across many regions emulated. Settlements like Uruk gave rise to civic models that still influence modern city design. Huge public centers, ringed by living districts, created a physical division between communal and personal life. Networked roads linking major hubs to outskirts set transport patterns still seen in present-day cities. Government buildings where records were kept, large storage complexes for managing goods, and artisan sectors supplying wider economies. All foundational city components first emerged in Sumerian communities. The notion of belonging to an organized urban population beyond family or tribal identity was a Sumerian invention that reshaped the structure of social cohesion worldwide. Their applied innovations greatly expanded what humans could accomplish. Perhaps the wheel, arguably their most transformative invention, redefined how people moved and manufactured materials. Irrigation systems, engineered to control the difficult Mesopotamian rivers, enabled intensified farming in regions far from their origin. Sumerian metalwork skills provided the basis for technological advances that eventually powered the industrial age. The plow ranks among Sumer's most significant mechanical breakthroughs. Early designs pulled by domesticated cattle dramatically improved crop yields by turning soil more effectively than hand tools. This boost in agricultural output supported expanding populations while lowering labor demand, enabling people to focus on non-farming roles. Sumerian designed seed drills that sowed grain while opening furrows, pushed efficiency even further, transforming food production. These practical tools laid the physical platform for later cultural progress. Numerical systems, initially created for administration, matured into abstract mathematics with vast applications. Their sexagesimal format, built around base 60, still exists in how we tell time and measure angles. The use of place value, critical to complex computation, was already present in Sumerian records. These breakthroughs enabled advanced calculations and informed multiple fields. Mathematical clay tablets from the Neo-Sumerian period display Surprising calculation abilities. Field measurements show early geometric thought, while scribes estimated canal volumes using 3D logic. The concept of reciprocals, numbers which multiply to 1, allowed for advanced division, but perhaps most important was the ability to express extremely large or small values with limited symbols, a revolutionary idea that made modern math possible. These foundational concepts influenced mathematical thinking throughout antiquity and into later eras. Legal ideas embedded in the first Sumerian codes deeply shaped legal frameworks in the Near East and Mediterranean. Writing down laws, making them visible, and systematizing their structure formed the basis of future legal theory. Clear distinctions between types of crimes, graded penalties based on context, and formal steps for legal proceedings are all present in these early legal sources, foreshadowing elements of today's judicial systems. The laws of Ur-Nammu outlined legal standards that echoed in later traditions. That legal rules should be open and not hidden was a key step toward the idea of lawful governance. Differentiating intentional from accidental harm provided a legal basis for understanding culpability. The emphasis on compensation over physical punishment introduced the principle of proportionality, which continued to influence legal thought. These elements matured in Hammurabi's code and carried through to Hebrew law, Greek jurisprudence, and eventually Roman legal practice, tracing an intellectual lineage from Sumer to modern legal frameworks. Symbolic stories from Sumerian mythology echoed through the religious imaginations of many later cultures. The flood account in the Epic of Gilgamesh mirrors later scriptural stories, tales of divine beings shaping humans from earth or clay, influenced multiple belief systems. Ideas of divine judgment, cosmic balance, and humanity's ties to supernatural forces established patterns of spiritual thinking that echoed for thousands of years across diverse theologies. The Sumerian flood myth, preserved in Gilgamesh, has strong parallels with the story of Noah. A God-sent deluge wipes out mankind, except one good man told to build a vessel. After the flood, he offers thanks, and the gods agree to spare humanity in the future. This storyline appears in later Hebrew writings and other ancient Near Eastern accounts. Likewise, Sumer's creation tales, where clay was molded into living humans, are reflected in Genesis, Greek legend, Egyptian religion, and numerous others. These themes show that Sumerian religious imagery shaped enduring frameworks for exploring the human condition and its divine origins. The memory of this extraordinary culture disappeared for thousands of years. Greco-Roman writers mentioned Babylon, but had no idea of the older Sumerian culture beneath. Biblical mentions of Babel and Shinar gave no clue about the rich civilization hidden under Mesopotamia. Only in the 1800s did methodical excavation begin to uncover the lost world. Early explorers such as Claudius Rich, who visited the area in 1811, mapped ancient ruins with remarkable accuracy. In the 1840s, Paul A. Mulbata and Austin Henry Laird excavated grand Assyrian sites, but missed the deeper Sumerian layers. French archaeologist Ernest de Sarzeau made the key discovery at Tello in 1877, finding statues inscribed with a non-Semitic language, the first recognized Sumerian texts. This sparked scholarly realization that Mesopotamia's culture had deeper origins. Leonard Woolley's work at Ur from 1922 to 1934 brought Sumerian brilliance to public attention. His excavation of the royal tombs revealed breathtaking artifacts: golden crowns, musical devices, fine ornaments, all showing a level of technological and artistic mastery well beyond what scholars had believed possible for 3000 BC. His careful techniques uncovered new insights into Sumerian death rites. 16 royal graves were found, with nobles buried alongside attendants, who seemed to have willingly followed them into death. Inside were astounding objects: the standard of Ur, a golden and lapis sculpture of a ram in thicket, and Queen Puabi's elaborate headdress. Perhaps most striking were the musical pieces, including a silver lyre with gold and lapis details, offering a tangible glimpse into musical traditions previously known only from writing. These finds reshaped perceptions of early art and raised profound questions about monarchy and afterlife beliefs. Equally vital was unlocking the cuneiform script, letting the Sumerians speak through their own words again. This process began with Georg Grotefend's work on Old Persian in 1802 and culminated in Henry Rawlinson's decipherment of Babylonian texts by the mid-century. Later scholars, analyzing thousands of recovered tablets, gradually decoded the Sumerian language, restoring its literature and history. Sumerian posed unusual difficulties, as it was unrelated to any known language family. Edward Hinks discerned its agglutinative grammar, where prefixes and suffixes attached to roots. Francois Lenormand identified phonetic values. Jules Oppert first named the language Sumerian in 1869, recognizing it as the tongue described in Akkadian texts. By the late 1800s, experts like Friedrich Delitzsch and Francois Thoreau-Danguin developed full grammatical models, enabling translations that revealed a rich and complex intellectual culture. Our grasp of Sumerian civilization continues to grow. Thanks to ongoing digs and fresh readings of ancient texts, digital tools now allow detailed analysis of records and economic patterns. Scientific testing of artifacts reveals forgotten production methods. Modern research expands appreciation of this pioneering society. Contemporary excavation techniques have revolutionized our knowledge. Satellite imagery exposes old river systems and settlement layouts. Archaeobotany identifies cultivated crops through microscopic plant remains. DNA testing of skeletons helps map ancient migrations and genetic ties. Climate sampling reconstructs past weather patterns that influence Sumer's evolution. These scientific methods complement traditional archaeology, giving a deeper picture of how environment and human invention together created the world's first true city-states. From small-scale farming between two rivers, through urban transformation, empire building, and final decline, the Sumerian venture into civilization shaped every future human society. Their inventive strategies for ecological and societal issues produced enduring cultural templates. In both their great successes and ultimate limitations, the Sumerians show the vast promise and serious complexity inherent in advanced human society, a legacy that still matters as we face the challenges of our own time.